The knock came at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. 3 sharp raps that shattered the quiet Michael Johnson had been trying to build for 3 weeks. He froze with a cardboard box balanced against his hip, the label "Emma's Room Fragile" written in his own careful handwriting. Nobody knew they lived here yet. The real estate agent had returned the keys 14 days ago. Angela's parents had finally stopped calling after the judge ruled in his favor. Through the peephole, he saw a white woman in her 40s, expensive wool coat over hospital scrubs, a manila folder clutched in one hand. Her hospital badge caught the porch light. She looked like she'd been awake for 2 days straight. Michael set the box down and unlocked the door. She blinked at him, startled. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. "I'm looking for David Howard. This is 247 Prescott Street?" "Mr. Howard moved out 6 weeks ago. My daughter and I bought the house in late August." Her shoulders sagged like he'd just told her the last bus had left without her. "Of course he did." She glanced at the folder, then back at the house number beside the door as if it might have changed. "I'm so sorry to bother you this late. I thought, never mind, I'll figure it out." Michael recognized bone-deep exhaustion when he saw it. He'd worn it himself for the better part of 3 years. "You all right? You look like you haven't slept since last week." "I'm fine." The words came out automatic, defensive. "Just a long day at work." "I've had plenty of long days. That's not what fine looks like." Before she could respond, small footsteps padded down the stairs behind him. Emma appeared at his elbow in purple pajamas, her stuffed butterfly, the one that used to be Angela's, clutched to her chest. "Daddy, who's the lady?" "Someone who got a little lost, sweetheart." Michael kept his voice gentle. Emma had enough uncertainty in her life without absorbing his. He turned back to the woman. "I'm Michael Johnson. Patricia Carter." She shifted the folder to her left hand and extended her right. Her grip was professional, firm, but her hand trembled slightly. Up close he could see the dark circles under her eyes, the tension in her jaw. Emma studied Patricia with the unfiltered directness only 6-year-olds possessed, the kind that made adults squirm. "You look tired like my daddy does sometimes." A ghost of a smile crossed Patricia's face. "I am very tired. My daddy makes good tea for tired people. Mommy used to say it fixes everything." The past tense landed between them. Patricia's expression shifted, something softening in her eyes. "Your mommy sounds very wise." Emma nodded solemnly, accepting this as simple fact. Michael made a decision he'd probably second-guess later. "She's right. I was about to make some anyway. You're welcome to a cup before you head back out into the night." Patricia hesitated, and he watched her cycle through what looked like a dozen reasons to say no. Then, exhaustion won. "Just for a few minutes. Thank you." He led her inside, acutely aware of the half-unpacked boxes lining the hallway, the unfurnished living room with its single couch and no curtains yet on the windows. This house was supposed to be a fresh start, a place where Emma could grow up without everyone whispering about the poor little girl whose mother died. 3 weeks in, and it still felt like camping in someone else's life. The kitchen had the essentials organized. That had been priority 1, but boxes still lined the wall under the window. Emma's medication chart hung on the refrigerator, the only decoration besides her purple butterfly drawing taped next to it. His architectural sketches covered the small table, plans for the Morrison and Associates Hospital renovation project that was supposed to close next month. "Give me 5 minutes to get Emma back to bed." He scooped his daughter up despite her half-hearted protest that she wasn't sleepy. Upstairs in her new room, the one with the morning light, the one he'd painted himself in the soft lavender she'd picked out, he tucked her under the quilt Angela's mother had made before things between them had turned ugly. "Is the tired lady going to be our friend?" "Maybe, baby girl, but we don't push. People come and go in their own time." "Like Mommy went?" The question landed in his chest like a stone. Emma asked variations of it every few weeks, testing the permanence of loss, trying to understand why her mother had left and not come back. Mommy didn't want to go. She fought very hard to stay with us. Sometimes bodies stop working no matter how much we want them to keep going. Okay. Emma nestled deeper into her pillow, satisfied for now. I like the tired lady's eyes. They're sad like yours used to be. Michael kissed her forehead and made it to the hallway before his throat closed up. 3 years and it still ambushed him, the casual cruelty of cancer that took Angela at 34 and left their daughter with fragments of memories and a purple butterfly. Downstairs, Patricia stood by the kitchen window looking out at the dark street, still holding that manila folder like it contained nuclear launch codes. Michael filled the kettle and pulled down 2 mugs. "You have a beautiful home." He almost laughed. The house was a 1960s fixer-upper with questionable plumbing and floors that creaked like a ship in a storm, but it was his and Emma's, and nobody could take it away from them. It will be, eventually. He set the kettle on the stove. My wife, my late wife. She used to say, a house becomes a home one decision at a time. We're working through the decisions. How long has it been? 3 years last April. Cancer. Stage 4 by the time they caught it. He kept his voice steady, matter of fact. He'd learned early that people didn't know how to handle grief that looked messy or raw, so he'd gotten good at packaging it neatly. Emma was 3. She doesn't remember much, which breaks my heart and feels like mercy in equal measure. I'm sorry. Patricia's voice carried genuine sympathy, not the performative kind that made him want to leave the room. Thank you. The kettle whistled. Michael made the tea, chamomile, the kind Angela had always preferred, and set a mug in front of Patricia. She wrapped both hands around it like she was trying to absorb its warmth directly into her bloodstream. He sat across from her at the table, pushing his sketches aside. So what has the CEO of Carter Medical hunting down retired homeowners at 10 at night? Her eyebrows rose. How did you... He gestured at her hospital badge, still clipped to her coat. Patricia Carter, CEO. Plus, I'm an architect. My firm did some subcontracting work on your new equipment installation at Charleston Memorial last year. The project manager wouldn't shut up about how demanding you were about tolerances, meant it as a compliment. For the first time since she'd arrived, Patricia smiled for real. I remember that project. The contractor kept trying to cut corners on the clean room specifications. I had to threaten to pull the contract twice. And you were right to. Medical equipment installation isn't where you compromise on quality. Exactly. She took a sip of tea, and some of the tension drained from her shoulders. You're the first person I've talked to in months who actually gets that. Part of the job. I spend half my time explaining to clients why we can't just make the walls thinner to save money. They talked for 10 minutes about building codes and hospital regulations, the kind of technical conversation that would bore most people to tears but felt like coming up for air after drowning. Then Patricia set down her mug and the professional mask slipped. I've been awake for 36 hours. Board meeting yesterday that turned into a war zone. My father's company is falling apart and he's... She stopped, collected herself. He's not capable of fighting anymore. And the CFO, Christopher Anderson, he's positioning himself to take over the moment my father steps down, which could be any day now. Michael waited. Sometimes people just needed someone to witness them falling apart for a minute. I've worked 85-hour weeks for 5 years trying to prove I can run this company. And you know what I realized yesterday? Her voice cracked. I looked up from my desk and couldn't remember the last time I talked to someone who wasn't trying to manage me or manipulate me or measure me against some impossible standard. I don't have friends. I have colleagues and board members and a father with dementia who looks at me sometimes like he's never seen me before. The words spilled out like she'd been holding them back for years, like Michael opening the door had somehow opened a release valve she didn't know she had. I'm sorry. You don't need to hear all this. Wouldn't have asked if I didn't want to know. Michael refilled her mug. And for what it's worth, respect doesn't come from exhausting yourself to death. It comes from knowing your worth and making other people recognize it. Easy to say when you're not a woman running her father's company with a board full of men who think you got the job because of your last name. Fair point. He met her eyes. "But I'm a black architect in South Carolina. I know what it's like proving yourself to people who've decided you don't belong before you open your mouth." Patricia studied him for a long moment. "How do you do it? Single parent? Full-time job? New house? Everything?" "Badly, most days. Emma's got a heart condition. Ventricular septal defect. There's a hole between the chambers, so we're in and out of the pediatric cardiologist every few months. I work from home when I can. The rest of the time I just try to stay one step ahead of disaster and hope for the best." He didn't mention the medical bills or Angela's parents trying to take Emma because a single father couldn't possibly manage, or the nights he lay awake running numbers trying to figure out how to afford surgery if the defect didn't close on its own. Patricia had enough weight on her shoulders without adding his. "Your daughter's lucky to have you." "I'm the lucky one. She's the only thing that kept me standing when Angela died." They talked until past midnight. About loss and loneliness and the weight of other people's expectations. About building lives that looked nothing like what they'd planned, but learning to live in them anyway. Patricia told him about Christopher, her ex-boyfriend from business school, who'd never forgiven her for choosing her career over their relationship. Michael told her about the custody battle, the judge who'd looked at him skeptically until his lawyer presented 6 months of meticulously documented care routines, and Emma's pediatrician testified that she was thriving. When Patricia finally stood to leave, she looked steadier somehow, like the conversation had given her something to stand on. "Thank you. I didn't realize how much I needed to talk to someone who wasn't keeping score. Come back any time. Door's open." She smiled, genuine and unguarded. "I might take you up on that." After she left, Michael stood at the kitchen sink washing the mugs and looking out at her taillights disappearing down Prescott Street. He didn't know what had just happened exactly, didn't know if he'd see her again, or if this was just one of those random intersections that meant nothing beyond the moment. But for the first time since Angela died, he'd talked to someone about something other than Emma's medication schedule or project deadlines, and it had felt like breathing after holding his breath for 3 years. Upstairs, Emma was still asleep, one arm flung over her purple butterfly. Michael stood in her doorway watching her chest rise and fall, counting breaths the way he had every night since the cardiologist first said the words, "heart defect." The medication kept things stable, but surgery was still a possibility if the hole didn't close naturally. Another thing to worry about, another weight to carry, another reason he couldn't afford to fall apart. He went to his own room and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Angela's side was still empty. He'd gotten rid of most of her clothes. Keeping them felt like building a shrine, and Emma didn't need to grow up in a museum, but her jewelry box still sat on the dresser. Sometimes he opened it just to smell her perfume on the velvet lining. Sleep came eventually, dreamless and insufficient. Saturday morning arrived with September sunshine and Emma demanding pancakes. Michael made them from scratch, the kind Angela used to make with blueberries and a hint of vanilla, while Emma colored at the kitchen table, narrating an elaborate story about a purple butterfly who lived in a castle made of flowers. At 10 o'clock they drove to the pediatric cardiologist for Emma's scheduled checkup. Dr. Donald Martinez had been managing her care since birth, a kind man in his 60s who never talked down to Emma and always gave her a sugar-free lollipop after appointments. The exam took 40 minutes. Emma sat on the table in a hospital gown covered in cartoon hearts, while Dr. Martinez listened to her chest, checked her blood pressure, ran an echocardiogram. Michael stood beside her, holding her hand, watching the monitor and trying not to let his anxiety show. Finally, Dr. Martinez straightened up and smiled. "Everything looks stable. The defect hasn't changed size, blood flow is good, no signs of heart failure. We'll keep her on the medication and monitor every 6 months. If it hasn't closed naturally by age 7, we'll talk about surgical options. But for now, she's doing great." The relief hit Michael like a wave. Emma hopped down from the table, already asking about lunch. "Can we get burgers? With fries?" "We can get whatever you want, baby girl." They ended up at the farmer's market instead. Emma spotted the white tents from the car and insisted they stop. She loved the chaos of it, the colors and sounds, the vendors who let her sample grapes and gave her free flower stems. Michael followed her through the crowd, only half paying attention until she yanked on his sleeve. "Daddy, look! The tired lady!" He turned and saw Patricia near the tomato stand, dressed in jeans and a simple blouse instead of the expensive coat from Tuesday night. She looked different without the armor of professional clothes, younger, less guarded, almost uncertain. When she spotted them, her face lit up. "Hi, Emma." "Hi, Michael." Emma bounced on her toes. "Did Daddy's tea help? Are you less tired?" Patricia laughed, and the sound was unself-conscious and genuine. "It really did. I went home and slept for 9 hours straight. First time in months." "Good. Daddy's tea fixes everything. Mommy was right." They walked through the market together, Emma collecting samples and chattering about school. She'd started kindergarten 2 weeks ago at Magnolia Elementary, while Michael and Patricia talked around her. Patricia admitted the board was still circling, Christopher still making power plays, her father having more bad days than good ones. But she'd taken the weekend off for the first time in a year, and it felt like learning to breathe again. Emma stopped to watch a street musician, mesmerized by his guitar. Patricia pulled Michael aside. "I wanted to thank you again. For Tuesday, I've been thinking about what you said, about respect coming from knowing your worth. I've spent so long trying to earn approval that I forgot I don't actually need it. Approval's overrated. Results speak louder anyway." Emma tugged on Patricia's sleeve, holding up an apple for approval. Patricia examined it with exaggerated seriousness and pronounced it perfect. Emma beamed. They bought vegetables and fresh bread and honey from a local beekeeper. When Emma spotted the flower stand, she dragged them both over, insisting Patricia needed flowers for her house. Patricia tried to protest, but Emma was immovable, so they left with a bouquet of purple asters that matched Emma's favorite color. It was easy, comfortable, the kind of Saturday morning Michael hadn't had since Angela got sick. Emma chattered between them, sometimes holding both their hands and swinging her arms, completely unself-conscious. A few people glanced at them. Black man, white woman, mixed-race child who could belong to either or both, but Michael had stopped caring about that years ago. As they were heading back to the parking lot, Emma stopped dead. "Daddy, why does the pretty lady smile with her mouth but not her eyes?" Michael winced. Patricia froze. "Emma, that's not—" "It's okay." Patricia's voice was very quiet. She knelt down to Emma's eye level. "You're right, sweetheart. I've forgotten how to smile for real. But your daddy and you are helping me remember." Emma nodded, satisfied with this answer, and skipped ahead. Patricia stood up and Michael saw her eyes were wet. "Sorry, she doesn't have a filter yet." "Don't apologize. She's right. Kids see things adults pretend not to notice." They walked to their cars in silence. Before getting in, Patricia turned back. This is probably weird, but would you and Emma want to have dinner sometime? Nothing fancy, I'd like to spend more time with people who aren't trying to manage me." "We'd like that." "Really?" "Really? Emma clearly already adopted you. Fair warning, she's relentless once she decides she likes someone." Patricia smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "I'm pretty relentless myself." Over the next 3 weeks, dinner became a regular thing. Patricia would show up Sunday evenings with takeout from various restaurants, Thai, Italian, a soul food place that reminded Michael of his grandmother's cooking, and they'd eat at Michael's kitchen table while Emma narrated her week. She told Patricia about her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, who had gray hair in a bun and smelled like peppermint. About her friend Daniel, who could already read chapter books. About the purple butterfly she'd painted in art class that the teacher hung on the wall. Patricia listened to all of it with genuine interest, asking follow-up questions that made Emma glow. Sometimes she'd stay after Emma went to bed and she and Michael would talk on the back porch, drinking tea or cheap wine, decompressing from their respective weeks. She told him about Christopher undermining her in board meetings, about her father Robert, who'd founded the company 50 years ago and was watching it slip through his fingers as dementia slowly erased him. about the weight of carrying a legacy she'd never asked for but couldn't walk away from. Michael told her about the Morrison and Associates hospital project that kept getting delayed by permit issues, about Emma's nightmares where her mother promised to come home and never did, about the crushing loneliness of single parenting, how every decision felt like it carried the weight of Emma's entire future. One Wednesday evening, Patricia showed up unannounced at 7 with a bottle of wine and panic in her eyes. "I shouldn't be here. I didn't want to be alone." Michael took the wine and led her to the back porch. She collapsed into the chair and put her face in her hands. "Christopher scheduled a board meeting for next Monday. Vote of no confidence. He's got enough support to force my father out and install himself as interim CEO. And my father, he had a bad episode today. Didn't recognize me for 2 hours. I can't fight this alone, and I can't ask him to fight when he doesn't even remember why he should." Michael opened the wine and poured them both a glass. "What do you need?" "I don't know. To scream, maybe. To run away and let them have the damn company." "Do you want to give them the company?" Patricia looked up at him, eyes red but fierce. "No. I want to prove every single one of them wrong. I want to run Carter Medical so well they have to eat every doubt they've ever had about me." "Then fight. You know the business better than Christopher ever will. You've increased revenue 43% since you took over. The board can read numbers even if they can't read you. Numbers won't matter if they don't trust my judgment. So make them trust it. Public victory. Something they can't ignore or spin." Patricia took a long drink of wine. "There's a project coming up. Expansion of our manufacturing facility. $80 million investment. The board approved it, but I'm in charge of execution. If I can bring it in under budget and ahead of schedule, Christopher's narrative falls apart. Then make that your focus. Let the vote happen if it has to. Focus on results they can't dispute." She sat with that for a while, turning it over. "How did you get so good at cutting through panic?" 3 years of practice. When Emma got diagnosed with the heart defect, I spent 6 months catastrophizing every possible outcome. Angela finally told me to stop preparing for disasters and start solving problems I could actually control. Changed everything. Patricia reached over and squeezed his hand. "Thank you. For this. For letting me fall apart without trying to fix me." "Anytime." She left an hour later, steadier. Michael watched her taillights disappear and wondered what he was doing, building this friendship or whatever it was with a woman whose life looked nothing like his. But then he thought about Tuesday night, the knock on his door, the way 2 strangers had recognized the same exhaustion in each other and decided to stop being alone for a minute. Sometimes that was enough. Sunday morning he took Emma to church, Gary Young's church, the one Michael had been attending since they moved to Charleston. Gary was Michael's age, black, a deacon, and a friend who'd taken Michael under his wing without asking questions. His wife, Brenda, ran the children's ministry, and their 3 kids had immediately adopted Emma as a 4th sibling. After the service, Gary pulled Michael aside. "You doing all right, brother? You look lighter lately." "I'm good. Emma's good. Just settling in." "And that white woman who's been coming around?" Michael shouldn't have been surprised, Gary knew. Nothing stayed private in a church this small. "Just a friend. She was having a rough time. Needed someone to talk to." Gary studied him with the assessing look of someone who'd known him long enough to read between the lines. "Just be careful, Mike. Not saying anything against her, but you got Emma to think about. And people talk. Let them talk. I know who I am. I know you do. Just don't want to see you or Emma get hurt." It was good advice coming from a good place, but it still rankled. Michael had spent 3 years being careful, being responsible, being the perfect grieving widower who never stepped outside the narrow box people wanted to put him in. He was tired of careful. That evening, Patricia called. "I have a strange request. Feel free to say no. Try me. There's a charity gala Saturday night, annual Carter Medical Foundation fundraiser. The board will be there, investors, community leaders, everyone who matters. I don't want to go alone. Would you and Emma come with me? Not as anything, just as friends. I need someone in my corner who isn't keeping score." Michael's first instinct was to say no. Galas meant formal wear he didn't own and social politics he had no interest in navigating. But he heard the vulnerability in Patricia's voice, the way she was trying so hard to sound casual about something that clearly wasn't. I'll need to find a tux and a babysitter for Emma. She's 6, not exactly gala appropriate. Bring her, please. I'll handle the tux rental. This whole thing is more bearable if I have people there who actually like me for reasons that aren't professional. Then yes, we'll come. Thank you. Truly. After he hung up, Emma appeared at his elbow. Was that Miss Patricia? It was. She invited us to a fancy party Saturday night. Emma's eyes went wide. With dresses and dancing? Probably. You'll need to wear something nice. Can I wear my purple dress? The one Grandma Angela made? Michael's throat closed up. His mother had made Emma that dress for Easter the year before Angela died, little purple flowers embroidered on white cotton. Emma had been too small for it then, but she'd grown into it over the summer. Yeah, baby girl, you can wear that dress. She threw her arms around him and he held her, breathing in the strawberry shampoo smell of her hair, feeling the steady beat of her imperfect heart against his chest. Whatever happened Saturday, whatever social minefield he was walking into, he'd do it for Patricia, and he'd do it with Emma beside him because that's what friends did. They showed up. The week passed in a blur of work deadlines and elementary school pickup and phone calls with Patricia, who grew increasingly anxious as Saturday approached. Thursday night she called at 10. I'm spiraling. Christopher is telling people you're my boyfriend and I hired your firm for the manufacturing project. None of it's true, but the optics... What manufacturing project? The facility expansion I told you about. We're taking bids from 5 firms. Morrison and Associates is one of them. Roger Thomas submitted a proposal last week. Michael's stomach dropped. Roger hadn't mentioned anything, but it made sense. Carter Medical was exactly the kind of client his firm pursued. Patricia, if there's any conflict of interest, we need to address it now. There's no conflict. Your firm bid before we even met. I recused myself from the evaluation process completely to avoid exactly this kind of accusation. Christopher knows that. He's just trying to create scandal where none exists. People are going to assume anyway. Let them. I know the truth. You know the truth. That's what matters. Saturday afternoon, Michael picked up the rented tux from the formal wear shop downtown. It fit well enough. Black jacket, white shirt, bow tie. He had to watch 3 YouTube videos to tie correctly. He looked at himself in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. When was the last time he'd dressed up for anything? Angela's funeral. Before that, their wedding. Emma twirled into his room wearing the purple dress, her hair pulled back with clips Brenda had helped her with that morning. Do I look pretty, Daddy? You look beautiful, just like your mama. She beamed and grabbed his hand. Let's go get Miss Patricia. They drove across town to Patricia's house, a sleek, modern townhouse in a neighborhood that made Michael's mortgage look like pocket change. Patricia answered the door in a navy gown that made her look like someone from a different world, which he supposed she was. But when she saw Emma, she knelt down immediately, gown and all, to admire the purple dress. Emma, you look absolutely gorgeous. Is that your favorite color? Purple like Mommy's butterfly. Daddy says I look like her. I bet she was very beautiful. Emma nodded seriously. She was the most beautiful in the whole world. Daddy says I have her smile. Patricia looked up at Michael and he saw something shift in her expression, some wall coming down. Then you're lucky. That's a good thing to inherit. The drive to the gala was quiet, Emma chattering from the back seat while Patricia and Michael both stared out their respective windows processing what they were walking into. The venue was the Carter estate, Robert's family home, a historic Charleston mansion with columns and gardens and a driveway that could fit 50 cars. Your father lives here? He refuses to leave, says he built the company from this house, he'll die in this house. Patricia's voice was sad. Most days he thinks it's 1985 and I'm still in high school. They pulled up to the valet stand. Michael's 10-year-old Honda looked comically out of place next to the Mercedes and BMWs. The valet took his keys with barely concealed skepticism. Michael tipped him anyway. Inside, the ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and 200 guests in formal wear. Michael did a quick count, maybe 4 other black attendees in the entire room. Emma pressed close to his side, overwhelmed by the noise and the crowd and the sheer scale of everything. Patricia took his arm, a gesture that was probably meant to look casual but felt like armor. "Ready?" "No, let's do it anyway." They entered together, and Michael felt every eye in the room turn toward them. The whispers started immediately, spreading like ripples across water. He kept his expression neutral and his hand on Emma's shoulder, grounding them both. Robert Williams sat in a wheelchair near the windows, an aide hovering nearby. Patricia led them over. The old man looked up, and for a moment his eyes were sharp and clear. "Patricia, you brought guests." "Dad, this is Michael Johnson and his daughter Emma. Michael's an architect, Emma's in kindergarten. Michael, my father Robert." Robert extended a trembling hand. Michael shook it gently. "Architect, you said? What firm?" "Morrison and Associates. We specialize in medical and institutional facilities." "Good firm. Doug Morrison is solid. Known him 30 years. Robert looked at Patricia. "You finally bringing someone to one of these things. About time." "We're friends, Dad." "Friends." Robert studied Michael with eyes that had gone vague again. "I had a friend once. Can't remember his name now. Funny how that works." A man in an expensive suit approached, tall, 40-something, the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. "Christopher Anderson," Michael guessed before Patricia even said his name. "Patricia, and you must be the +1 everyone's talking about." Michael shook his hand, meeting his eyes without flinching. "Michael Johnson. Christopher Anderson, CFO. So how did you two meet?" "Patricia knocked on my door by mistake looking for the previous homeowner." "How serendipitous." Christopher's smile was all teeth. "And I understand your firm is bidding on our manufacturing facility?" "Morrison and Associates submitted a proposal, yes. Bit unusual, mixing business with pleasure." Patricia's hand tightened on Michael's arm, but he kept his voice level. "We're not mixing anything. Morrison's bid stands on merit." Patricia recused herself from the evaluation to avoid any appearance of conflict. "Of course she did. I'm sure it's all above board." Christopher turned to Patricia. "Looking forward to Monday's board meeting. Should be illuminating." He walked away. Emma tugged on Michael's jacket. "I don't like that man. He smiles like he's lying." "Out of the mouths of babes," Patricia murmured. They made it to their assigned table, head table with Christopher and his fiancée Julie, a woman who looked like she'd never had an original thought in her life, plus 3 board members. Sharon Blake was a woman in her late 50s with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. Thomas Scott and George White were both in their 70s, old guard who'd known Robert since before Patricia was born. Dinner was served. Conversation flowed around them, polite and pointed in equal measure. Sharon asked about Michael's background. Clemson University, 15 years at Morrison, 3 major hospital projects. Thomas Scott probed his personal life with questions that sounded casual but landed like assessments. "Single father must be challenging. How do you manage a demanding career with a young child?" Michael set down his fork and looked the man directly in the eye. "The same way anyone manages, sir, one day at a time, with discipline, love, and the understanding that my daughter comes first. Always." Emma, who'd been quietly eating her chicken, piped up. "Daddy's the best. He makes me breakfast every morning and helps with homework and reads stories before bed. And when I had my heart doctor appointment last week, he held my hand the whole time, even though I could tell he was scared." The table went quiet. Michael wanted to disappear into the floor, but Emma kept going, oblivious to the adults around her processing what she'd just revealed. "I have a hole in my heart, but Dr. Martinez says I'm doing great. The medicine helps, and maybe it'll close by itself so I don't need surgery. Daddy says I'm brave, but I think he's braver because he doesn't cry, even though I know he wants to sometimes." Patricia's hand found Michael's under the table and squeezed. Thomas Scott cleared his throat. "You've raised a remarkable daughter, Mr. Johnson." "I'm just trying to do right by her." Christopher leaned forward. "Michael, I understand you're widowed. My condolences." How long ago was that? The question was designed to probe, to find vulnerability. Michael didn't give him the satisfaction of looking away. 3 years this past April. Cancer. And you're dating again. Moving on. That's healthy. Patricia started to protest, but Michael stopped her with a slight pressure on her wrist. He addressed Christopher directly, voice calm but carrying. We're not dating. We're getting to know each other as friends. There's no timeline on grief, Mr. Anderson, and there's no rule book for when or how you're allowed to connect with other human beings after loss. I'm not moving on from my wife. I'm learning to live in the life I have instead of the one I lost. George White jumped in, trying to smooth things over. Well, Patricia, it's good to see you have some balance in your life. The board has been concerned. You work so hard. Everyone needs personal relationships, family support. That's when Michael knew he had to say something. He could feel Patricia's tension, could see Emma watching him with those perceptive eyes, could sense the entire table waiting to see how this would play out. He set down his fork and stood. 200 people in the ballroom. All of them would hear this. With respect, sir, I need to address something that's been bothering me since we sat down. His voice carried, steady and clear. Patricia Carter's personal life is hers to manage. But if the board cares about metrics, let's talk about the right ones. Since Patricia became CEO 3 years ago, she's increased company revenue 43%. She's led 6 successful FDA approvals for new medical devices. She's expanded Carter Medical into international markets that were closed to you before. She works harder than anyone in this room and delivers results that speak for themselves. The ballroom had gone quiet. Michael kept going. If the measure of leadership is whether someone's married or has a so-called complete personal life, then you're measuring the wrong things. And frankly, you're disrespecting someone who's earned her position 100 times over. Patricia's judgment isn't compromised because she chooses to prioritize her career. Her judgment is exactly what's kept this company thriving while others are struggling. He sat back down. The silence stretched. Then Robert Williams, who'd seemed half asleep in his wheelchair, struggled to his feet, his aide rushing to help. The young man is right. Robert's voice was thin, but it carried. I built Carter Medical in a garage while my wife raised Patricia alone for the first 10 years. I worked 100-hour weeks, missed birthdays and anniversaries and school plays. Nobody questioned my completeness. Nobody suggested I needed balance or personal fulfillment to be effective. These double standards are cowardice dressed up as concern. I won't have it at my table or in my company. He sat back down heavily, exhausted. The aide fussed over him. But the message had landed. Sharon Blake looked at Patricia with something like respect. Thomas Scott and George White had the grace to look embarrassed. Christopher's jaw was tight, his hands clenched on the table. Emma tugged Michael's sleeve and whispered loud enough for the table to hear. Daddy, you sounded like a superhero. Some of the tension broke. A few people smiled. Patricia's hand was still in his under the table, holding on like he was the only solid thing in the room. The rest of the dinner passed in awkward small talk. When it finally ended, Patricia drove them home in silence. Emma fell asleep in the back seat before they hit the highway. Michael watched Charleston's lights blur past his window and tried to process what he'd just done, the bridge he might have just burned. Patricia pulled into his driveway and killed the engine. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. You might have cost yourself the contract. George and Sharon are on the evaluation committee. If speaking truth costs me work, I'll find other work. I don't compromise on principle. Not for money, not for anyone. She was quiet for a long moment. Nobody's ever defended me like that. Then they're all cowards. You deserve people in your corner who aren't afraid of the fallout. She leaned across the console, and for a heartbeat Michael thought she might kiss him. He wanted her to, but he stopped her with a gentle hand on her shoulder. Not yet. I'm sorry, I thought. You didn't misread anything. But we need to be sure this is real and not just relief or gratitude. I have a daughter who watches everything I do. If we start something, it needs to be intentional, and that takes time. Patricia nodded, eyes wet. You're right. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just give me time to figure out what this is." She drove away. Michael carried sleeping Emma inside and tucked her into bed, still in her purple dress. He sat beside her in the dark, watching her breathe, counting the steady beat of her imperfect heart. Gary's words echoed in his head. "Be careful, Mike." But careful had gotten him 3 years of isolation and loneliness. Maybe it was time to risk something. His phone buzzed. Gary's wife, Brenda, texting. "Michael, Emma collapsed at our house. We called 911. They're taking her to Charleston Memorial." The world stopped. Michael hit 80 on the highway, hazard lights flashing, his mind racing faster than the Honda's struggling engine. Patricia had offered to drive, but he'd barely heard her, just thrown himself into his car and gunned it. Emma's purple dress still hung over the passenger seat from where he'd tossed it after carrying her inside. 3 hours ago she'd been eating chicken at a fancy gala, pronouncing him a superhero. Now paramedics were rushing her to Charleston Memorial, and he wasn't there to hold her hand. He made it to the emergency room in 14 minutes, a trip that should have taken 25. Patricia's car pulled in 30 seconds behind him. She must have followed, must have broken every speed limit to keep pace. He didn't wait, just ran through the automatic doors and found Brenda in the waiting area, her face streaked with tears. "I'm so sorry, Michael. 1 minute she was playing with my kids, the next she just collapsed. Her lips turned blue and I didn't know what to do. Where is she?" They took her back. "Dr. Martinez is on his way." Michael pushed through to the nurse's station. A young woman in blue scrubs tried to stop him, but Patricia appeared at his elbow, hospital badge visible, voice carrying the authority of someone who'd funded half this building. "I'm Patricia Carter, CEO of Carter Medical. This man's daughter was just admitted. Take us to her. Now." The nurse's resistance crumbled. They followed her through double doors into the pediatric emergency bay. Emma lay on a gurney, oxygen mask over her small face, monitors beeping steadily. An ER doctor Michael didn't recognize was examining her chest with a stethoscope. "Emma." Michael was at her side before anyone could stop him. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and frightened. "Daddy? My heart hurts." "I know, baby girl. The doctors are going to fix it." Dr. Martinez arrived 10 minutes later, moving with the controlled urgency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. He pulled Michael aside while nurses adjusted IV lines and checked vitals. "The VSD is deteriorating rapidly. The hole is enlarging, putting significant strain on her heart. We need to do surgery, tonight if possible, tomorrow morning at the latest." The words hit like physical blows. Michael had prepared for this possibility for 6 years, but preparation meant nothing when your daughter's life hung in the balance. How serious? Very. Without intervention, she's at high risk for heart failure within weeks. With surgery, excellent prognosis, 95% success rate for VSD repair at her age. Cost? Dr. Martinez's expression shifted, uncomfortable. "Total cost will be around $180,000. Your insurance covers $125,000. You'll need approximately $55,000 out of pocket before we can schedule." Michael's savings account held maybe $12,000. The rest would have to come from somewhere: credit cards, loans, selling everything he owned that wasn't nailed down. "Do what you need to do. I'll handle the money." Patricia touched his arm. "Michael, let me help. I can write a check right now." He turned to face her, and the refusal came from somewhere deep and non-negotiable. "No. I appreciate it more than you can possibly know. But I don't take money for my daughter's life. This is mine to carry. That's pride talking. That's principle. If I accept money from you for this, what does that make me? What does that teach Emma when she's old enough to understand? I handle my family's needs. Period." Patricia looked hurt, but she stepped back, recognizing the line he'd drawn. Dr. Martinez cleared his throat. "We can schedule surgery for 6 a.m. tomorrow. I'll need your consent form signed within the hour." Michael signed everything they put in front of him. Patricia stayed, silent presence in the corner of the pediatric ward while nurses prepped Emma for overnight observation. Brenda came back with Gary, who pulled Michael into a fierce hug. "Church is praying, brother. Kenneth's calling everyone on the prayer chain. We got you." The surgery prep took hours. Emma drifted in and out, confused and scared, but trying to be brave because that's what 6-year-olds did when their parents were falling apart. Michael held her hand, told her stories about the purple butterfly, promised her everything would be okay, even though promises felt like lies when machines beeped around them, tracking her failing heart. At 11 p.m., Dr. Martinez came back with the surgical consent forms and a detailed explanation of the procedure. They'd open her chest, repair the hole with a synthetic patch, monitor her in ICU for 48 hours, then move to regular pediatric care for recovery, 6 to 8 weeks before she'd be back to normal activity. Any questions? Michael had a million questions, but they all boiled down to one. Will she be okay? I've done this surgery 200 times. I've never lost a patient her age with her specific presentation. Barring unforeseen complications, Emma will live a completely normal, healthy life. It was the best reassurance medicine could offer. Michael signed the forms. They moved Emma to pre-surgical at midnight. The anesthesiologist came by to explain the process, talking to Emma directly, treating her like a person instead of a patient. She'd go to sleep counting backward from 10, wake up in recovery with her daddy right there waiting. Patricia had disappeared at some point. Michael assumed she'd gone home. It was past midnight and she had no obligation to sit through this with him. But at 1 a.m. she reappeared carrying coffee and looking determined. "I called in some favors. The Hospital Foundation Board owes me for last year's funding drive. They're covering $20,000 of your out-of-pocket costs. Don't argue. It's foundation money, not mine, and it goes to families in need all the time. Patricia, I'm not done. I also called Kenneth Walker. Gary gave me his number. He's mobilizing the church. They're taking up a collection after Sunday service. Between the foundation and the church, you'll have most of what you need." Michael wanted to argue, wanted to refuse on principle, but the relief was too powerful. He could handle $35,000 through loans and credit cards. 55 had been impossible math. "Thank you." She sat beside him in the uncomfortable plastic chair. "You don't have to thank me. You'd do the same if our positions were reversed." They waited through the early morning hours, drinking terrible hospital coffee and not talking much. Gary and Brenda stayed until 3, then went home to their own kids. Patricia stayed. Michael didn't ask why, and she didn't offer explanations, just sat there being present in the way that mattered when everything else was falling apart. At 5 a.m. nurses came to prep Emma for surgery. Michael walked beside her gurney as far as they'd let him go, right up to the surgical suite doors where Dr. Martinez waited in scrubs and a surgical cap. Emma's voice was small and frightened through the pre-sedation fog. "Daddy, will I see Mommy?" The question drove a spike through his chest. He knelt beside the gurney so she could see his face clearly. "No, baby girl, you're coming back to me. I promise. You can't break promises. And I won't. I swear on your mommy's memory, you're coming back." They wheeled her through the doors. Michael watched until they swung shut, then turned and walked blindly back to the waiting room where Patricia caught him before his knees could give out. "She's going to be okay. Dr. Martinez is the best." "You don't know that. Nobody knows that." "I know she has a father who would move heaven and earth for her. That counts for something." The surgery took 7 hours. Michael paced for the first 2, then collapsed into a chair and stared at the wall, too numb to think. Patricia stayed glued to her phone, working through emails and board documents because sitting idle would have driven her crazy. At hour 3, Gary arrived with Brenda and their kids. At hour 4, Kenneth Walker appeared with half the church deacons, announcing they'd collected $8,000 that morning through an emergency phone tree, would collect more on Sunday. Michael broke down then, crying for the first time since Angela's funeral, overwhelmed by the weight of community carrying him when he couldn't carry himself. Kenneth gripped his shoulder, solid and immovable. "You don't carry this alone, son. That's what family does. We carry each other. Now you sit here and let us hold you up while Emma fights her fight." At hour 5, Patricia disappeared and came back with food nobody ate. At hour 6, Gary led the group in prayer, voices rising and falling in familiar cadences that Michael had heard his whole life but never quite believed until now, when belief was all he had left. At hour 7, Dr. Martinez pushed through the surgical suite doors, still in his scrubs, but with his mask pulled down and a tired smile on his face. "Surgery went perfectly. We repaired the VSD with a synthetic patch, checked all her valves, everything looks excellent. She's in recovery now, should wake up in about an hour. You can see her in 30 minutes. Relief hit Michael like a tidal wave. He tried to stand, to thank the doctor, but his legs wouldn't hold. Gary caught him and kept him upright while the doctor continued. "She'll need to stay in ICU for 48 hours while we monitor her heart function, then move to regular pediatric care for about a week. After that, 6 to 8 weeks of limited activity at home. But barring complications, she should live a completely normal life. No restrictions, no medications, just regular checkups every few years." The deacons erupted in quiet celebration, thanking God and the doctor in equal measure. Patricia's hand found Michael's and held on tight. They led him into recovery at 8 a.m. Emma lay in a hospital bed surrounded by monitors, chest bandaged, IV lines running from both arms, but breathing steadily on her own. Her eyes were still closed from anesthesia. Michael pulled a chair to her bedside and took her hand, careful not to disturb the pulse oximeter clipped to her finger. "I'm here, baby girl. Daddy's right here. You did so good." Patricia stood in the doorway, not intruding, but present. Emma's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and groggy. "Daddy? Right here. Did I keep my promise? Did I come back?" "You kept your promise." Her eyes shifted to the doorway. "Miss Patricia came too?" Patricia stepped closer. "I had to make sure you're okay. Are you Daddy's girlfriend now?" Patricia glanced at Michael, something vulnerable in her expression. "I don't know yet, sweetheart. We're figuring it out. But I'm definitely your friend." Emma managed a small smile. "That's good. Daddy needs more friends." She drifted back to sleep. Michael sat beside her for the next 6 hours, holding her hand, counting her heartbeats on the monitor, breathing in sync with her because that was all he could do. Patricia stayed until early afternoon, then left to deal with work emergencies she'd been ignoring all morning. Gary and Brenda brought Michael food he couldn't eat and offered to sit with Emma so he could sleep, but he refused. Not until she was awake enough to know he was there. Emma woke up properly around 4 p.m., groggy and in pain, but alert enough to complain about the IV and ask for ice chips. The ICU nurse, a kind woman named Sandra who'd raised 3 kids of her own, brought Emma a purple popsicle and pronounced her the bravest patient she'd seen all week. "You know what brave means, sweetheart? It means being scared but doing it anyway. You were very brave." Emma considered this. "Daddy says being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about being scared and still showing up." Sandra looked at Michael with new respect. Smart Daddy. Monday morning came with bright October sun and news that Emma's recovery was progressing exactly as expected. They moved her out of ICU into regular pediatric care, a room with windows and a TV and a reclining chair where Michael could finally sleep for more than 20 minutes at a time. Patricia appeared around 10 carrying coffee and looking agitated. "I need to talk to you, privately." They stepped into the hallway. Patricia kept her voice low, but fury bled through every word. "Christopher called an emergency board meeting yesterday while Emma was in surgery. Scheduled it specifically when he knew I'd be here. They voted to disqualify Morrison and Associates from the manufacturing facility bid, claimed conflict of interest because of our relationship. The news registered but felt distant, abstract compared to Emma hooked to monitors 20 feet away. "Did you approve the vote?" "I wasn't there." He told the board I'd recused myself due to conflict of interest. Complete lie. I never recused from this specific vote, only from the evaluation process. But he scheduled it Sunday at 8 a.m., sent the meeting notice at 11 p.m. Saturday night while we were at the gala. Clever. It's a coup. He's using our friendship to destroy your firm's contract and undermine my authority. The board also put me on probationary review with a leadership vote scheduled for next month. Michael leaned against the wall, too exhausted to process the full implications. Can you fight it? I can try, but the optics are terrible. CEO's personal friend loses major contract. She fights to reinstate it. Looks exactly like the nepotism Christopher's accusing us of. Then don't fight it. Let the contract go. Patricia stared at him. That's $3.2 million for your firm. Roger Thomas built his entire year around this project. And I'm not going to win it by having you rescue me. If we fight this together, we prove Christopher right, that I'm using you for connections, that your judgment is compromised. The only way either of us wins is if I prove the contract was legitimate on its own merits, and I can't do that with you fighting my battles. So what? You just accept losing? I accept that some things matter more than money. Emma matters more. You matter more. I'm not going to let Christopher turn our friendship into a weapon against both of us. Patricia looked like she wanted to argue, but something in his expression stopped her. I hate this. I hate that doing the right thing means letting them win. They only win if we compromise who we are to fight them. The moment I accept money or favors I don't earn, I become exactly what they think I am. She left frustrated, and Michael returned to Emma's room, collapsing into the recliner while his daughter dozed. His phone buzzed. Roger Thomas calling, probably to discuss the lost contract. Michael silenced it. Tomorrow's problem. Tuesday afternoon, the Charleston Business Journal published an article. Carter Medical CEO's personal relationship raises procurement questions. Anonymous sources, obviously Christopher, suggesting Patricia had shown favoritism to Michael's firm, that she'd hired her boyfriend's company, that her judgment was compromised by their relationship. The article included photos from the gala, Patricia's hand on his arm, both of them looking intimate and conspiratorial. Gary forwarded Michael the worst of the social media response. Comments calling him a gold digger, suggesting he'd seduced a desperate CEO for contract money, questioning whether Emma's surgery was even real or just a sympathy play. The racism was quieter but present in every assumption that a black man with a white woman in power must be using her somehow. Gary showed up that evening, anger tight in his shoulders. You seeing this garbage they're saying about you online? I've seen. What are you going to do? Nothing. Arguing with lies just gives them oxygen. People who want to believe the worst will believe it regardless of what I say. So you just take it? Let them drag your name through the mud? For now, sometimes the strongest response is refusing to engage. Gary sat down heavily. I don't know if I could do that, brother. Just sit here while people call you a liar and worse. I've got a daughter recovering from heart surgery. That's the only fight that matters right now. The rest is noise. But the noise got louder. Wednesday morning, Roger called again. This time, Michael answered. His boss sounded tired and careful. The Carter Medical contract is officially dead. Board sent formal notification this morning. We're out of the running, disqualified for ethical concerns. I'm sorry, Roger. I never meant to cost the firm this contract. I know. But Michael, we need to talk about optics. The firm can't afford to be associated with a scandal, even if it's manufactured. I'm going to need you to take a leave of absence until this blows over. The words landed like a punch. You're suspending me? I'm protecting the firm, and honestly, protecting you. If you're on leave, people can't say Morrison is benefiting from your relationship with Patricia Carter. It removes the conflict of interest appearance. Once things settle down, we'll bring you back. And if things don't settle down? Roger was quiet for a long moment. Let's cross that bridge when we come to it. For now, take the leave. Focus on Emma. We'll call it family medical leave so it doesn't hurt your employment record. Michael hung up and stared at the wall. In 72 hours, he'd lost a major contract, his job, and his professional reputation, all because he'd defended Patricia at a charity gala and refused to pretend their friendship didn't exist. Emma stirred in her hospital bed. Daddy, why do you look sad? He forced a smile. Just tired, baby girl. How are you feeling? My chest hurts, but not as bad as yesterday. Can we watch cartoons? They watched cartoons. Michael tried to focus on animated characters and Emma's running commentary, but his mind kept circling back to the same question. Had he made the right choice? If he'd just kept his mouth shut at the gala, Morrison would still have the contract. If he'd accepted Patricia's money, he wouldn't be drowning in medical debt. If he'd never opened the door that Tuesday night, none of this would be happening. But then Emma wouldn't have Patricia reading her stories when she was scared. Michael wouldn't have someone who understood what it meant to carry weight nobody else could see. Sometimes the right choice looked like disaster before it looked like salvation. Patricia came by Wednesday evening after Emma was asleep. She looked exhausted and furious in equal measure. Christopher leaked the story to the Journal. I have proof. Emails from his personal account to the reporter. He manufactured this entire scandal. Can you prove it to the board? Maybe. But it won't matter if they don't want to hear it. Half of them already think I'm too emotionally invested in you to lead objectively. Then maybe they're right. She stared at him. What's that supposed to mean? Maybe your judgment is compromised. Maybe mine is too. We met 6 weeks ago, Patricia. We barely know each other, and already we're caught in board politics and lost contracts and scandal. Maybe we moved too fast. Are you seriously suggesting we stop being friends because Christopher's playing games? I'm suggesting we take a step back before we both lose everything that matters. You need to focus on saving your job. I need to focus on Emma's recovery. Everything else is a distraction. Patricia's voice went cold. You're pushing me away. I'm being realistic. No, you're being a coward. The first time things get difficult, you run because it's easier than fighting for something that scares you. The words hit harder than they should have because they carried truth Michael didn't want to examine. I'm not running. I'm protecting my daughter from getting hurt when this falls apart. When, not if. You've already decided we're going to fail. History suggests that's a safe bet. Patricia grabbed her coat. You know what the difference is between you and Christopher? He attacks from ambition. You attack from fear. Both destroy, but at least his is honest about what it is. She left. Michael sat in the dark hospital room listening to Emma breathe and wondering how he'd managed to lose everything good in his life in less than a week. Thursday and Friday passed in a blur of Emma's recovery and Michael's isolation. Gary came by with updates from the church. They'd collected $12,000 total for Emma's medical bills. Kenneth Walker wanted to hold a special service to celebrate her successful surgery. The community was rallying even as Michael's professional world collapsed. Saturday morning, Emma was discharged with strict instructions for home care and follow-up appointments. Michael drove her home, helped her settle on the couch with pillows and blankets, made her lunch and turned on cartoons and tried not to think about Patricia's empty house across the street. Emma noticed, though. Kids always noticed. Daddy, why hasn't Miss Patricia visited? She's busy with work, sweetheart. Is she mad at us? No, baby. Sometimes grown-ups just need space to figure things out. Emma absorbed this with the seriousness of someone who'd learned too young that people left and didn't always come back. I miss her. She tells good stories. I know you do. Sunday, Gary picked them up for church. Kenneth Walker called Michael up during announcements to publicly thank God for Emma's successful surgery and announced the congregation had collected $14,000 for the family's medical expenses. Michael stood in front of 200 people who'd loved him when he was a stranger and tried to find words adequate to the weight of their generosity. I came to Charleston 3 months ago because I needed a fresh start, somewhere Emma could grow up without everyone watching her, waiting to see if she'd break. You all welcomed us without questions, loved us without conditions. When Emma got sick, you didn't ask if we deserved help. You just helped. That's the gospel lived out loud. Thank you. The congregation erupted in amens and applause. Emma, sitting in the front row between Brenda's kids, beamed like she'd just won a prize. After service, Kenneth pulled Michael aside. "Got a minute to talk?" "My office." Kenneth's office was small and cluttered with books and old sermon notes. He gestured Michael into a chair and closed the door. "You're carrying weight, son. More than just medical bills and lost contracts. Talk to me." Michael hadn't planned to unload, but something about Kenneth's patient silence opened the floodgates. He told the older man everything. Meeting Patricia, the gala, defending her in front of Charleston's elite, Emma's surgery, and Christopher's manufactured scandal. Roger putting him on leave, Patricia walking away angry because Michael had pushed her out before she could hurt him worse. When he finished, Kenneth was quiet for a long moment. "You remember what I said when Emma went into surgery? About not carrying weight alone?" "Yes, sir." "Seems to me you forgot that lesson real quick. Woman offered to help with medical bills, you refused. Woman tried to fight for your contract. You told her to back off. Woman wanted to stay connected while you figured things out. You pushed her away. You seeing a pattern?" "I was protecting her." "You were protecting yourself. Big difference. You've been a single father for 3 years, carrying everything alone because you had to. But now you don't have to, and you're so used to the weight you can't figure out how to share it." "What if I share it and she leaves anyway? What if Emma gets attached and Patricia decides this is too complicated? I can't let my daughter lose another person she loves." Kenneth leaned forward. "Son, you can't protect Emma from loss by refusing to love. You can only teach her that love isn't worth the risk, that a woman worth loving. Is that the lesson you want her to learn?" The question sat heavy in the room. "I don't know how to do this, how to let someone in when I've spent 3 years keeping everyone out. You do it scared. You do it imperfect. You do it knowing it might hurt. But you do it anyway because the alternative is dying inside while you're still breathing." Michael drove home with Kenneth's words circling his mind. Emma fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the morning's excitement. He carried her inside and tucked her into bed for an afternoon nap, then stood at his kitchen window staring at Patricia's dark house across the street. His phone buzzed. Gary's text. "Stop being stupid. Go talk to her." Michael grabbed his coat and walked across the street before he could talk himself out of it. Knocked on Patricia's door and waited, heart hammering against his ribs. She answered in sweatpants and an old t-shirt, hair pulled back, face bare of makeup. She looked tired and angry and beautiful. "What do you want?" "To apologize, and to tell you that you were right." She crossed her arms but didn't close the door. "About what, specifically?" "About me being a coward. About attacking from fear instead of ambition. About deciding we'd fail before giving us a chance to succeed. I spent 3 years building walls to protect Emma and myself, and I got so good at it I forgot how to let people in. And what changed? Kenneth Walker called me a stubborn fool in kinder words, and Emma asked why you stopped visiting. And I realized the thing I'm most afraid of, losing you, is exactly what I'm causing by pushing you away." Patricia was quiet, processing. "I turned down the Johns Hopkins Fellowship." The statement came from nowhere, took Michael completely by surprise. "What fellowship?" "Christopher's been pushing my father to recommend me for a maternal fetal medicine fellowship at Johns Hopkins. 2 years, prestigious program, exactly the kind of thing that would cement my reputation in medical device innovation. The board loves it. My father, in his lucid moments, keeps telling me to take it." "Why didn't you?" "Because I don't want to specialize in MFM. I like what I do now, running the company, dealing with innovation and strategy instead of clinical work, but mostly because taking it felt like running away from a fight I'm not done fighting. Christopher wants me gone so he can take over. If I leave for Baltimore, he wins." "So you're staying to prove a point?" "I'm staying because I choose to, because this is my company and my life, and I'm done letting other people decide what's best for me, including you." The last 2 words carried weight. "I wasn't trying to decide for you." "Yes, you were. You decided our friendship was too complicated, so you ended it without asking what I wanted. You decided I needed protection, so you refused help without considering what I needed. You keep making choices for both of us and calling it principle when really it's just fear." She was right, and they both knew it. "So what do we do now?" Patricia stepped back from the door. "Come inside. Let's figure it out together instead of you deciding for both of us." Michael followed her into a house that matched her professional image. Clean lines, expensive furniture, everything perfectly coordinated and somehow sterile. They sat on opposite ends of her couch, the space between them feeling like miles. "I don't know how to do this," Michael admitted. "How to let someone in when I've spent 3 years alone. You do it imperfectly, you do it scared, but you do it honest." The echo of Kenneth's words made him smile despite everything. "My church deacon said almost exactly that 3 hours ago." "Smart man." Patricia pulled her knees to her chest. "I need you to understand something. I'm not asking you to fix my problems or fight my battles. I'm asking you to stand beside me while I fight them myself. There's a difference. I'm still learning what that looks like. So am I. My father controlled my life for 30 years, decided where I'd go to school, what I'd study, who I should date. Christopher tried to continue that after we broke up. I've spent 5 years proving I don't need anyone to make decisions for me, but that doesn't mean I don't want someone in my corner." "I want to be in your corner. I just don't want Emma to get hurt if this doesn't work out." Patricia's expression softened. "Neither do I. I love that kid. She's brave and honest and sees through every adult pretense. Watching you with her, seeing how you parent through fear and exhaustion and still show up every single day, that's what made me want to know you better. Not your job or your potential usefulness. You." Something loosened in Michael's chest, a knot he'd been carrying so long he'd forgotten it was there. "I'm falling for you. Have been since that first night you knocked on my door looking lost. Scares the hell out of me because the last time I fell for someone I lost her and it nearly broke me. I can't survive that again. You survived losing Angela. You survived a custody battle. You survived Emma's surgery and Christopher's coup and losing your job. You're stronger than you think." Strength and survival aren't the same as living. Patricia moved closer, bridging the space between them. "Then maybe it's time to start living instead of just surviving." She kissed him, not desperate or rushed, but deliberate and certain. Michael kissed back, letting 3 years of isolation and loneliness crack open into something that felt dangerously like hope. When they pulled apart, Patricia's eyes were wet. "I'm not Angela. I'm not going to die and leave you. I'm not going to walk away when things get complicated. But I need you to stop pushing me out every time you get scared. I'll try. No promises except that I'll try. That's all I'm asking." They sat together until the sun set, talking through logistics and boundaries and what this meant going forward. Patricia had a board meeting Monday where Christopher would push for her removal. Michael had medical bills and no job, and a daughter who needed 6 more weeks of limited activity. Neither of them had answers, but at least they were facing the questions together. When Michael finally went home, Emma was awake, sitting on the couch coloring. "Did you talk to Miss Patricia?" "I did." "Is she still mad?" "We worked it out. She'll probably come visit tomorrow if you want." Emma's face lit up. "Can she read me a story? She does the voices better than you do." "I'll ask." That night Michael lay in bed thinking about Kenneth's words, about Patricia's certainty, about the risk of opening his life to someone who could destroy him if this fell apart. But he thought more about Emma asking if Patricia was mad, about 3 years of teaching his daughter that love meant loss, about the legacy he was building by refusing to try. Angela had made him promise to keep living. He'd kept breathing, kept working, kept Emma alive and thriving. But he hadn't lived, not really, just survived each day and called it enough. Maybe it was time for enough to become more. Monday morning, while Emma was at her follow-up appointment with Dr. Martinez, healing perfectly, right on schedule, Patricia walked into the Carter Medical boardroom to face Christopher's vote of no confidence. She'd prepared her defense, compiled 3 years of financial data showing the company's growth under her leadership, documented every decision that had increased shareholder value. Christopher presented his case first. Claims that Patricia's judgment was compromised, that she'd shown favoritism in the facility contract, that her personal relationship with Michael created ethical concerns the board couldn't ignore. He had photos from the gala, quotes from the Business Journal article, testimony from Thomas Scott about Patricia's lack of professional boundaries. Then Patricia stood. "Every claim Christopher just made is factually false and provably so. The Morrison & Associates contract was awarded September 10th. I met Michael Johnson September 13th, 3 days after the award. I recused myself from the evaluation process on August 22nd, before bids were even submitted. Christopher knows this because he has access to the same procurement records I do. He's deliberately lying to manufacture a scandal that doesn't exist." She pulled up emails on the boardroom screen, showed the paper trail, demonstrated the timeline with receipts that couldn't be disputed. Sharon Blake's expression shifted from skeptical to angry. Even Thomas Scott looked uncomfortable. Furthermore, Christopher scheduled the vote to disqualify Morrison while I was at the hospital with Michael's daughter during emergency heart surgery. He sent meeting notice at 11 p.m. Saturday night, held the vote 8 a.m. Sunday morning, and told the board I'd recused myself when I'd done no such thing. That's not protecting the company. That's staging a coup. Christopher tried to interrupt, but Patricia cut him off. "I'm not finished. Christopher also leaked this story to the Charleston Business Journal using his personal email account. I have copies of those emails too, thanks to our IT department. He manufactured a scandal, fed it to the press, and is now using it to justify removing me from a position he's wanted for himself since my father promoted me 3 years ago." She laid it all out, every manipulation and lie, every power play Christopher had made while banking on the board not checking his facts. By the time she finished, Sharon Blake was furious, and even George White looked ashamed. The vote when it came was 5-1 in Patricia's favor. Only Christopher voted for her removal. Sharon moved to terminate Christopher for ethical violations. The motion passed 4-2. Security escorted Christopher out while the entire office watched. Patricia called Michael from her car. "It's done. Christopher's fired. I'm still CEO. The board's reinstating Morrison to the bid process with formal apology for the error." "Patricia, you don't have to. I'm not reinstating it for you. I'm reinstating it because it was the right decision made for the right reasons, and Christopher corrupted it. If Morrison's proposal is still the best, you'll win on merit. If not, you won't. But either way, it'll be fair." Michael could hear the exhaustion and triumph in her voice. "Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay. I just proved my father's board that I can lead without compromise. Come over tonight? Emma too. We'll celebrate." They celebrated with pizza and cartoons, Emma telling elaborate stories about her surgery that got more dramatic with each retelling. Patricia listened to all of it with perfect attention, asking questions and laughing in the right places, and Michael watched them together and thought maybe Kenneth was right. Maybe love was worth the risk after all. November arrived with cooler temperatures and Emma's slow march back to normal life. The surgical scar on her chest was healing into a thin pink line that would fade with time, Dr. Martinez promised. 6 weeks of limited activity meant no running, no climbing, no rough play with other kids at school. Emma handled the restrictions with grace most days and frustration others, asking why her body had betrayed her when she'd done nothing wrong. Michael had no good answers, just held her when she cried and reminded her that hearts could be fixed even after they broke. Patricia became a constant presence, showing up after work with dinner or books or just sitting quietly while Emma did homework. She didn't try to replace Angela, nobody could, but she carved out her own space in their small family, reading bedtime stories with different voices that made Emma giggle, teaching her to play chess with purple pieces Patricia had bought specifically for that purpose. The Morrison & Associates bid sat in evaluation limbo while the board conducted an ethics review of the entire procurement process. Roger called weekly with non-updates, carefully neutral about Michael's chances. Michael tried not to think about it, focused instead on the freelance architectural work he'd picked up through old contacts, small projects that kept money flowing but wouldn't pay medical bills or mortgages long term. 3 weeks into November, Patricia knocked on his door at 9 p.m. on a Thursday carrying Thai food and nervous energy. "We need to talk." Michael's stomach dropped. Those 4 words never preceded good news. "About what?" "My father." She set the food on the kitchen table but didn't open it. "He's declining faster than expected. The neurologist says he has maybe 6 months before he won't recognize anyone consistently. The board wants him to step down officially, appoint me permanent CEO instead of acting. But there's a condition." "What condition?" "They want me to demonstrate stability, personal and professional." Sharon Blake was very clear. "The board needs to see that I have support structures in place, that I'm not going to burn out or make emotional decisions under pressure." She specifically mentioned you. "Me?" "She thinks our relationship is either a liability or an asset depending on how we handle it. If we're serious, if we're building something real, it demonstrates judgment and stability. If we're casual, if this falls apart in 6 months, it proves Christopher right about my priorities being skewed." Michael sat down heavily. "So the board is evaluating our relationship?" "Not officially, but yes, essentially. And before you get angry, think about what they're asking. They want to know I have people in my life who aren't employees or board members, that I'm capable of maintaining relationships that aren't transactional. It's not unreasonable. It's invasive. It's the cost of leadership at this level. Everything is scrutinized, including who you love and why." The word love hung between them, unexamined. "What are you asking me?" Patricia took a breath. "I'm asking if you're in this for real or if we're still figuring it out. Because if we're figuring it out, I need to know now so I can adjust my board strategy. And if we're in this, if you see a future here, then I need you to meet my father while he still knows who I am. I need him to see that I'm not alone, that I've built something worth protecting." "You want me to meet your father so your board feels better about your personal life?" "I want you to meet my father because he matters to me and you matter to me, and I want the 2 most important men in my life to know each other before dementia takes him completely. The board stuff is just logistics." She was right, but it still felt like pressure, like their relationship was being used as evidence in a case he hadn't agreed to participate in. "When?" "Sunday dinner. Just you and Emma, my father and his daytime nurse. Nothing formal, just family." Family. The word carried weight they hadn't quite acknowledged yet. "I need to think about it. This isn't just me anymore. It's Emma, too. If we do this, if we make our relationship official enough to parade in front of your father and board, I'm bringing her into something she doesn't fully understand. I need to make sure that's fair to her." Patricia's expression shifted, hurt flickering across her features. "You think I'd hurt her?" "I think relationships end even when people don't mean them to. I think Emma's already attached to you, and if this doesn't work out, she loses another person she loves. I need to be sure you're ready for that responsibility before we make this more than what it is." "And what is it right now?" "I don't know. 2 people who care about each other trying to figure out if caring is enough." Patricia stood up. "You know what I've learned about you, Michael? You're so afraid of loss that you keep 1 foot out the door of everything good in your life. You loved Angela, but you're terrified to love again. You love Emma, but you're scared you'll fail her. You care about me, but you won't commit because commitment means risk. At some point you have to decide, do you want to live or just survive? Because survival is safe, but it's also lonely." She left the Thai food on the table and walked out. Michael sat in the silence of his kitchen, listening to Emma singing upstairs and wondering if Patricia was right, if he'd become so good at protecting himself that he'd forgotten how to be vulnerable enough to build something real. Emma appeared in her pajamas. "Was that Miss Patricia? Why didn't she stay?" "We had a disagreement, sweetheart." "About what?" "Grown-up stuff." Emma climbed into his lap, something she hadn't done much since the surgery made her chest tender. "Do you love her?" The question was simple and devastating. "I think so. Maybe. It's complicated." "Mommy used to say love isn't complicated. People make it complicated because they're scared. Michael held his daughter and wondered when she'd gotten wise enough to read him so accurately. Mommy was very smart. She'd want you to be happy. She told me that before she died. She said, "Make sure Daddy knows it's okay to be happy again." Michael's vision blurred. You were 3. You can't remember that. I remember. She smelled like the purple flowers we put on her grave, and she held my hand and said to tell you when I was old enough to understand. I'm 6 now. That's old enough. He cried then, holding Emma and grieving Angela all over again, but differently this time, with permission instead of guilt. His daughter had carried this message for 3 years, waiting until she thought he could hear it. And now, sitting in their kitchen with Thai food getting cold and Patricia's absence filling the room, maybe he finally could. Saturday morning he called Patricia. "We'll come to dinner, Emma and me, tomorrow at your father's." "Are you sure?" "No, but I'm tired of being sure meaning safe. Emma deserves to see her father take risks on things that matter." Patricia's relief was audible through the phone. "Thank you. Really. This means everything." Sunday afternoon they drove to Robert Williams's house, a large colonial in one of Charleston's old money neighborhoods. Emma wore her purple dress again, insisted on carrying a drawing she'd made for Patricia's father, a purple butterfly with "Get well soon" written in careful kindergarten letters. Robert answered the door himself, leaning heavily on a walker, but his eyes were clear and sharp. The nurse, a patient woman named Carol, hovered nearby but let him maintain the dignity of greeting his own guests. "You must be Michael, and this is Emma." Robert smiled at the little girl. "Patricia's told me about you both. I made you a picture." Emma held out her drawing. "Because Miss Patricia says you're sick and pictures make people feel better." Robert took it with trembling hands. "This is beautiful, sweetheart. I'll hang it in my study where I can see it every day." Patricia appeared from the kitchen wearing jeans and a sweater, more relaxed than Michael had ever seen her. She kissed her father's cheek and led them to the dining room where the table was set for 5. Robert at the head, Patricia and Michael on one side, Emma and Carol on the other. Dinner was simple. Roast chicken and vegetables. Nothing fancy despite the elegant setting. Robert was sharp through most of the meal, asking Michael about his work, listening to Emma's elaborate explanation of her heart surgery with genuine interest. He told stories about building Carter Medical from nothing, about Patricia's mother who died when Patricia was 15, about the sacrifices required to build something that lasted. "Patricia tells me you lost your wife. Cancer." "Yes, sir. 3 years ago." "It doesn't get easier, just different. You learn to carry it." Robert looked at his daughter. "Patricia's mother would have liked you. She had good instincts about people." Halfway through dessert, Robert's clarity began to slip. He called Patricia Margaret, his late wife's name, and asked why she'd let her hair go gray. Carol gently redirected him while Patricia's composure cracked slightly, grief visible in the way her hands shook as she cut her pie. Emma noticed immediately. "It's okay if you're sad. Daddy gets sad sometimes when he thinks about Mommy. He says it's because love doesn't stop just because people do." Patricia's eyes filled, but she smiled. "Your daddy's very wise." "I know. He tells me all the time." The moment broke the tension. Robert surfaced from his confusion long enough to laugh. After dinner, Carol took Robert upstairs for his evening medication. Patricia walked Michael and Emma out to the car. "Thank you for coming, for meeting him while he's still mostly here. He's a good man. I can see where you get your stubbornness. That's the polite word for it." Patricia knelt down to Emma's level. "Thank you for the picture, sweetheart. Grandpa Robert really loved it." Emma's eyes went wide. "Is he going to be my grandpa for real?" Patricia glanced at Michael, uncertain how to answer. He nodded slightly, permission to be honest. "Would you like that?" "I never had a grandpa before. Mommy's daddy died before I was born and Daddy's daddy lives far away. It would be nice to have one." "Then yes, if you want, he can be your grandpa." Emma hugged Patricia fiercely, and Michael watched his daughter claim this woman as family, with the easy certainty of children who hadn't learned yet that love came with conditions. Driving home, Emma fell asleep in the back seat. Michael's phone buzzed. Patricia texting, "My father asked if we're getting married. I told him we're taking it slow. He said life's too short for slow. He might be right." Michael typed back, "Maybe, but we've got time to figure it out." Patricia's response came immediately. "Do we? My father has 6 months. Emma's 6 years old. You're 38. I'm 40. How much time are we spending being careful that we could be spending being happy?" He didn't have an answer to that. Monday morning, Roger called with news Michael had stopped expecting. Morrison and Associates had won the Carter medical contract. The board had completed their ethics review, found no evidence of impropriety, and selected Morrison's proposal based on design quality and cost efficiency. $3.2 million, 18-month timeline, the biggest project the firm had ever landed. "You can come off leave effective immediately." And Michael, "I'm sorry. I should have trusted you instead of protecting the firm's reputation. You've always operated with integrity. That shouldn't have changed just because things looked bad. I understand why you did it. Sometimes perception matters as much as reality." "Maybe, but I'm learning the difference between protecting something and having faith in it. Welcome back." Michael called Patricia immediately. "We got it. Morrison won the contract." Her joy was unrestrained. "On merit. They chose you on merit. Christopher must be losing his mind." "Do I want to know how the board vote went?" "Probably not. But for what it's worth, Sharon Blake said your firm's proposal was superior by a significant margin. You didn't win because of me. You won despite the scandal. That matters." It did matter. More than Michael had realized it would. For the first time since this whole mess started, he felt like maybe he'd made the right choices. Refusing Patricia's money, refusing to let her fight his battles, insisting on winning through work instead of connections. Principle had felt like self-sabotage in the moment, but turned out to be the only path that led somewhere solid. Thanksgiving came with an invitation from Patricia to join her and Robert for dinner at the Williams house. Michael accepted, brought Emma and a sweet potato pie he'd made from Angela's recipe. Gary and Brenda had invited them to church dinner, but Michael wanted Emma to have this, a different kind of family, chosen instead of inherited, built from shared loss and hard-won trust. Robert had a good day, mostly lucid through the meal, though he occasionally slipped and called Emma by Patricia's childhood name. They ate turkey and stuffing, while Emma told Robert about her chess strategy, and he offered pointers from decades of playing. After dinner, Robert pulled Michael aside while Patricia and Emma washed dishes. "Take care of her, my daughter. She's stronger than she thinks, but more fragile than she admits. And she loves you both, even if she's too careful to say it plainly yet." "I love her too, sir." "Then don't waste time being careful. Life's too short and unpredictable. If you're going to build something, build it while you can." Robert died 3 weeks later, peacefully in his sleep 2 days before Christmas. Patricia found him Christmas morning when she came by with presents and coffee. She called Michael before she called 911, voice hollow with shock and grief that had been preparing for this moment but still couldn't absorb its arrival. Michael drove over immediately, leaving Emma with Brenda, and found Patricia sitting on her father's bed, holding his hand and crying silently. He sat beside her and let her lean into him while Carol called the funeral home and made the necessary arrangements that death required. "I knew it was coming. The doctor said weeks, maybe a month, but I thought we'd have Christmas. I thought I'd get one more good day. I'm sorry. He asked me last week if I was happy. I told him I was getting there. He said that was good enough, that happiness was a direction, not a destination. I think those might have been the last really coherent words he said to me." The funeral was 2 days after Christmas, well attended by Charleston's business community and medical establishment. Patricia gave the eulogy, speaking about her father's legacy with the same competence she brought to everything, but Michael could see the grief underneath, the little girl losing the parent who'd defined her entire life, even when they'd fought about how she should live it. Emma attended despite being young for funerals, wearing the purple dress and holding Patricia's hand through the service. Afterward, at the reception, she asked Patricia if Grandpa Robert was with Mommy now in heaven. "I think so, sweetheart. I think they're both watching over us. Then they can meet. Mommy can tell him about the butterflies, and he can tell her about chess. They'll be friends." Patricia broke down then, properly, and Emma hugged her while dozens of Charleston's elite watched a 6-year-old comfort a grieving CEO with more grace than most adults could manage. The reading of the will happened in January. Robert had left Patricia controlling interest in Carter Medical plus a substantial trust. But he'd also left a letter, handwritten while he could still manage it, that the lawyer read aloud with Patricia and Michael present. "My dearest Patricia, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're finally free to run the company without my ghost looking over your shoulder. I have one request. Don't run it the way I did. Don't sacrifice everything else for business. Don't miss the life that happens while you're building a legacy. I loved your mother, and I loved you, but I loved the company too much, and it cost me both of you in different ways. Build something better. Build something that leaves room for love and family and all the messy, beautiful things I was too afraid to prioritize. The man you brought to dinner, Michael, he's good for you. I could see it in how you looked at him, like he made you remember there's more to life than board meetings and profit margins. Don't let him go because it's complicated or scary or doesn't fit the plan. Plans change. Love is what remains when everything else falls apart. Your mother taught me that too late. Don't make my mistake." Patricia cried reading it, and Michael held her in the lawyer's office while she grieved not just her father's death but all the years they'd fought instead of connecting, all the times Robert's expectations had crushed her autonomy, and also the ways he'd loved her even when he'd failed at showing it. February brought the formal board meeting where Patricia was confirmed as permanent CEO without opposition. Sharon Blake nominated her, Thomas Scott seconded, the vote was unanimous. Christopher was long gone, taken a CFO position at a competitor where his ambition wouldn't be constrained by ethics or loyalty. The manufacturing facility broke ground in March with Michael overseeing the architectural execution. He and Patricia established careful boundaries between professional and personal, never discussed the project at dinner or their relationship at site meetings, maintained the separation that let both parts of their lives flourish independently. Spring arrived with Emma's 7th birthday, and the news that her heart had healed perfectly, no restrictions anymore, no medication, just yearly checkups to make sure everything stayed stable. Dr. Martinez pronounced her completely healthy, and Emma celebrated by running full speed across the hospital parking lot, arms spread like wings, finally free of limitations that had defined her since birth. "I can do anything now, right, Daddy? I can run and climb and play kickball?" "Anything you want, baby girl. Your heart is perfect." "Just like Mommy's was perfect?" The question caught him off guard. "Yeah, just like that." That evening, Emma asked Patricia to read her bedtime story, a routine that had become standard whenever Patricia came over. Michael listened from the hallway while Patricia did voices for the characters, and Emma giggled at all the right parts. When she finished, Emma's voice came quiet and serious. "Miss Patricia, are you going to marry my daddy?" Patricia's pause was long enough that Michael almost interrupted. Then, "Would you want me to?" "I think so. You make him smile the way Mommy used to, and you don't leave even when things are hard. Daddy says that's what love means, showing up even when it's hard. Your daddy's very wise." "I know. So are you going to marry him?" "That's something your daddy and I need to figure out together. But Emma, whatever happens between us, I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me now. Promise?" "Promise." Michael went downstairs and poured himself a whiskey, thinking about promises and commitment and what it meant to build a life with someone when you'd already lost the first life you'd built. Patricia found him on the back porch 20 minutes later. "How much did you hear?" "Enough." She sat beside him. "I meant what I said. I'm not leaving, regardless of what you and I decide about us. Emma's family now. That doesn't change. She asked me last week if you were going to be her new mom. I told her you could never replace Angela, but you could be something different, something just as important. What did she say? That she didn't want a replacement, she wanted a bonus, like having two moms instead of choosing between the old one and the new one. Patricia's eyes filled. She's the wisest person I know. She is. And she deserves stability and certainty in people who show up. I can give her that on my own, but I think we could give her something better if we did it together. Patricia turned to face him fully. Is that you asking what I think you're asking? Depends. What do you think I'm asking? I think you're asking if I want to build a life together. Real commitment, not just dating. You and me and Emma figuring out what family looks like when it's chosen instead of inherited. Michael took a breath. I don't have a ring. I don't have some elaborate proposal planned. I'm just a widower with medical debt and a daughter and a $3 million contract I can't afford to mess up. But I love you, and I think we could build something good if we stopped being so careful about protecting ourselves. That's the worst proposal I've ever heard. Probably. I'm out of practice. Patricia kissed him, long and certain. Yes. I didn't technically ask yet. Yes. To building a life together. To being a family. To taking the risk, even though it's terrifying. Yes. They told Emma the next morning over breakfast. She cheered and immediately started planning the wedding, suggesting purple everything and butterflies, and inviting her entire kindergarten class. Patricia and Michael let her narrate possibilities while they drank coffee and held hands under the table and tried to process how quickly careful had turned into committed. The engagement itself was quiet. No announcement in the paper, no fancy party. Just Patricia moving some of her things into Michael's house, her toothbrush appearing in the bathroom, her chess set taking up permanent residence on the kitchen table. Emma called her bonus mom Patricia to distinguish from Mommy Angela, a naming convention that honored both women without forcing either to be replaced. They planned the wedding for early summer, small ceremony in Gary's church with Kenneth Walker officiating. Patricia insisted on inviting the board, Sharon Blake and Thomas Scott and the others who'd stood by her through Christopher's attempted coup. Michael invited Morrison and associate staff and the church congregation who'd carried him through Emma's surgery. Emma insisted on inviting Mrs. Patterson and her entire class because weddings should have children who could appreciate the cake. 2 weeks before the wedding, Patricia came home from work looking shell-shocked. Johns Hopkins called. They're offering the fellowship again. 2 years, starting in August. The board thinks I should take it now that my father's gone, establish credentials independent of the family legacy. Michael's stomach dropped. What did you tell them? That I'd think about it. But Michael, Baltimore, 2 years. That's not what we just agreed to build. Do you want it? The fellowship? Patricia sat down heavily. Part of me does. The part that's been trying to prove myself my entire life, that wants credentials nobody can question. But the bigger part knows I'd be miserable spending 2 years away from Emma and you, doing work I don't actually want to do, just to satisfy people who will never be satisfied anyway. So turn it down. The board will see it as choosing relationship over career again, proving Christopher right about my priorities. Then prove him right. Choose the life you want instead of the life they expect. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. Patricia looked at him for a long moment. My father spent 40 years building Carter Medical and died alone because he chose the company over everything else. I don't want that. I want this. Messy family dinners and Emma's kindergarten plays and fighting about whose turn it is to do dishes. I want a life, not just a legacy. Then take it. Tell Hopkins no. Tell the board you're staying because you choose to, not because you have to. She called Hopkins the next morning and declined. The board was less pleased, but Patricia stood firm. She was staying in Charleston, running Carter Medical on her terms, building a life that included professional success and personal fulfillment instead of sacrificing one for the other. The wedding day arrived with June sunshine and Emma in a purple dress she'd picked out herself. Patricia wore simple white, elegant but not ostentatious. They stood in front of Kenneth Walker while 200 people, board members and church congregation, architects and nurses, kindergarten students and cardiac surgeons, watched them promise to build something together. Michael's vows were simple. Patricia, You knocked on my door by mistake and found exactly who you needed. You've loved Emma like she's yours. You've made me remember what it means to live instead of just survive. I promise to stand beside you, not in front or behind, to let you fight your own battles while being in your corner, to build a life that honors both where we've been and where we're going." Patricia's vows were steadier. "Michael, you taught me that strength isn't about never needing anyone. It's about choosing wisely who you need. You've given me Emma, who reminds me every day that wisdom comes in small packages. You've given me permission to want more than professional success. I promise to show up even when it's hard, to choose us over easier options, to build a family that's chosen instead of inherited." Emma stood beside them holding the rings, taking her role as ring-bearer with appropriate seriousness. When Kenneth pronounced them married, she cheered louder than anyone. The reception was in the church fellowship hall, simple and joyful. Emma danced with everyone who'd stand still long enough. Sharon Blake gave a toast about Patricia's leadership and courage. Gary talked about Michael's journey from lost widower to found man. Kenneth Walker blessed the marriage and the family they were building. Late in the evening, after Emma had fallen asleep on a pile of coats and most of the guests had gone home, Michael and Patricia stood in the parking lot looking at stars. "Your father was right. Life's too short for being careful. He was right about a lot of things. Just took me 40 years to hear them." They drove home. Patricia's townhouse sold, her things fully integrated into the house on Prescott Street that had started as Michael's fresh start and become their shared foundation. Emma stirred when Michael carried her inside but didn't wake, just murmured something about purple butterflies and settled deeper into sleep. Michael tucked her in while Patricia changed out of her wedding dress. When he came downstairs, she was in the kitchen making tea, the routine that had started the night they met, now part of their permanent rhythm. "I was thinking about something Emma said last month, about having two moms instead of choosing between them. She's wise beyond her years." "She is, and I think she's right. You're not replacing Angela, you're adding to what Angela built. Different, but equally important." Patricia handed him a mug. "I'll never try to replace her. She's part of Emma's story, part of your story. She's why you're the man I fell in love with, because you loved her enough to keep living after she died, because you became the father Emma needed even when you were falling apart. That's not something to move past. That's something to honor." They sat together in the quiet kitchen, two people who'd knocked on wrong doors and found right places, who'd built trust through crisis and commitment through choice. Outside, Charleston settled into summer night. Across the street, the house where Patricia had knocked that September evening sat dark. Michael thought about how much had changed in 9 months. Emma's repaired heart, Christopher's defeat, Robert's death, this marriage that felt both terrifying and inevitable. "No regrets?" Patricia smiled. "Not one. You?" "Just that I didn't open the door faster that first night. You opened it exactly when you were supposed to. We both did." 6 months later, on a December afternoon while Emma was at school, Patricia found Michael in his home office working on the manufacturing facility final designs. The building was nearly complete, ahead of schedule and under budget, Morrison's best work and Michael's proof that merit still mattered. "I have news." Something in her tone made him look up from his drafts. "Good news or concerning news? Depends on your perspective. I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air while Michael processed. They'd talked about children abstractly, someday possibilities, but Patricia was 41, and they'd only been married 6 months, and Emma was just getting used to having a bonus mom. "Michael, say something." He stood and pulled her close. "That's amazing. Terrifying, but amazing. Does Emma know?" "Not yet. I wanted to tell you first. Make sure you're okay with this." "Am I okay with having a child with the woman I love?" "Yes." "Am I scared out of my mind?" "Also yes." Patricia laughed, relief and joy mixing. "That's fair. I'm terrified too. 41 and pregnant wasn't exactly in my 5-year plan. Good thing we're better at improvising than planning." They told Emma that evening over dinner. Her reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. "I'm going to be a big sister? For real?" "For real. Can we name the baby Purple?" "That's a color, not a name, sweetheart." "But it's the best color. The baby should have the best name." They compromised eventually on Emma helping choose a name that involved purple somehow. Patricia was due in July, right around Emma's 8th birthday, perfect timing for a summer baby and a sister who was already planning elaborate games and tea parties. The pregnancy was smooth, textbook according to Dr. Sarah Chen, who'd delivered half of Charleston's babies over 30 years. Patricia worked through the first 2 trimesters, only slowing down when her doctor insisted in the third. Emma attended appointments when she could, fascinated by ultrasound images of her sibling growing. "Does the baby know about me?" "The baby can hear your voice when you talk to Mommy's belly, so yes, I think so." Emma took to reading stories to Patricia's stomach, elaborate narratives about purple butterflies and brave hearts and families that chose each other. The baby arrived on July 15th, 3 days before Emma's 8th birthday, a girl with Patricia's eyes and Michael's dark hair, and a cry that suggested she'd inherited both parents' stubbornness. They named her Sophie Grace, Sophie because Patricia's mother had been Margaret Sophia, and Grace because Emma insisted the baby needed a name about beauty and kindness. Emma met her sister in the hospital, holding Sophie with the careful reverence of someone who understood how fragile and precious new life was. Michael watched his daughters together, one who'd survived a broken heart, one who'd arrived with a whole one, and thought about Robert's letter, about building something that left room for love instead of just legacy. The manufacturing facility opened in August, with Sophie 3 weeks old and sleeping through the ribbon cutting in Patricia's arms. Michael had designed the building with Robert's philosophy in mind: sustainable materials, natural light, spaces that honored both efficiency and humanity. Carter Medical's board attended, Sharon Blake giving a speech about innovation and integrity, about companies built on values instead of just profit. After the ceremony, standing in the main atrium with its soaring windows and clean lines, Patricia pulled Michael aside. "My father would have loved this. The building, the way you balanced function and beauty, the fact that you delivered it ahead of schedule and under budget. Think he'd be proud?" "I think he'd be grateful. For the building, yes, but more for giving me a reason to stay in Charleston, to build a life here instead of chasing credentials that didn't matter. You gave me permission to want more than professional success. You gave yourself that permission. I just reminded you it existed." Emma appeared with Sophie in her arms, expertly supporting the baby's head the way the nurses had taught her. "Daddy, can we show Sophie the butterflies?" Michael had incorporated purple butterfly motifs throughout the building's design, subtle accents in the metalwork, stained glass in the entryway, a sculpture in the courtyard. Small tributes to Angela that honored her memory without making the space a memorial. They walked through the completed building as a family, Emma narrating for Sophie even though the baby was too young to understand, Patricia pointing out design elements that had required negotiation with contractors, Michael explaining structural choices that had made the project work. It was everything Robert's letter had asked for: legacy and love, professional success, and personal fulfillment, all existing together instead of in competition. That evening, after Emma and Sophie were asleep, Michael and Patricia sat on the back porch where so many conversations had happened, where Patricia had first broken down about her father, where Michael had proposed without a ring, where they'd built trust conversation by conversation. "I was thinking about that first night, when I knocked on your door looking for someone who didn't exist. Best wrong door anyone ever knocked on. You didn't think so at the time. You looked terrified when you opened it. I was terrified. Strangers after dark with a daughter to protect. But you looked more lost than threatening." Patricia smiled. "I was lost. Had been for years, just didn't realize it until someone offered me tea and actually listened when I fell apart. You saved me that night. You saved yourself. I just witnessed it. No. You gave me permission to be human instead of perfect. To fall apart and trust someone would help me stand back up. That's everything." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind built over months of learning each other's rhythms. Charleston's summer night wrapped around them, humid and alive. Inside, 2 daughters slept, one who'd survived broken hearts, one who'd arrived whole, both loved fiercely and completely. Michael thought about Angela's final words, her insistence that he find love again, her wisdom that Emma had carried for 3 years before delivering it when he could finally hear. She'd been right. Love didn't replace love. It multiplied, each person adding to what came before instead of erasing it. Do you ever wonder what Angela would think? About us, about Sophie, about the family we've built? Patricia considered the question seriously. I think she'd be grateful that Emma has people who love her, that you found someone to build a life with, that our daughter will grow up knowing her big sister had a mother brave enough to let go so others could hold on. That's generosity I'll never fully understand, but I'll spend my life being worthy of. It was the right answer, the only answer that mattered. 18 months after knocking on the wrong door, Patricia Carter had found home in a half-unpacked house with a widower and his daughter. And Michael Johnson had learned that second chances weren't about forgetting first loves, but about honoring them by continuing to live, to risk, to build families from choice instead of accident. The purple butterfly drawing Emma had made hung in Sophie's nursery now, Angela's memory living on through children who would know her story even if they couldn't know her directly. And on quiet nights when the house settled into sleep and Charleston's lights blurred through the windows, Michael would stand in his daughter's doorways counting their breaths and believing finally that happiness wasn't something you earned by suffering enough, but something you built by choosing love even when love meant risk. 3 knocks on a September night, a woman looking for someone who didn't exist, finding someone who needed her to exist. That was the entire story, the whole truth of how wrong turns became right paths and mistakes became miracles. Michael closed the back door and went upstairs to where his family slept, Patricia in their room, Emma and Sophie in theirs, and knew with absolute certainty that every hard choice, every moment of fear, every risk he'd taken had led exactly here, to this imperfect, beautiful, complicated life he wouldn't trade for anything safer or simpler or more certain. Angela had been right. Keeping her promise meant living fully, loving fearlessly, building something that honored what he'd lost by embracing what he'd found. He'd opened the door that Tuesday night. Everything else followed from that single choice, to let a stranger in, to offer tea instead of directions, to witness someone else's exhaustion and recognize his own reflected back. Some doors opened to endings, some to beginnings. The best ones opened to both, closing one chapter and starting another in the same moment, the same breath, the same act of courage disguised as courtesy. Michael had thought he was just being kind to a lost woman on a dark night. Turned out he'd been opening the door to the rest of his life. And every day since, he'd been grateful he didn't hesitate,